We're going to continue today with chapter 15, which is more about genetics. And now we're going to look just at that chromosome. Okay. And again, the chromosome is the basis of all inheritance. The information about you to build you and everything is on those chromosomes. Okay. So when Mendel did his work, he didn't know about chromosomes. He didn't know about DNA, didn't know anything. He just proposed that there was hereditary factors. And now, today, we call those hereditary factors genes. And a gene is located on the chromosome, and basically it's a code of your nitrogen bases, A, T, C, and G. Whatever that code is, remember, makes a certain protein, that's a gene. Okay. And again, it was really cool that Mendel came up with these ideas because he didn't have any idea about all that other stuff. He just proposed it and he was spot on. Okay. So the location of a gene, now they can actually tag it on a chromosome. They'll tag it with like fluorescent dye. So they've actually mapped out the whole human genome. They know, they look at the 46 chromosomes and they can tell you where eye color is and hair color and diseases and everything. You could probably look it up online. There's probably a chart of it and it shows you everything. Basically, what they did was they sent out to teams of scientists, okay, you're in charge of chromosome 1, you're in charge of chromosome 2, and so on. And they mapped out all the characteristics. It's pretty cool. And it's been quite a while since that was done. And here's an example of the fluorescent dye to tell you where a gene is. Okay, this is what it would look like. Okay, when you looked at it, then it confirmed two of his ideas, the law of segregation. And that just says, when fertilization occurs, because of meiosis, you're going to end up with gametes, and they're going to have different, here we have the two alleles, big R and little r. They're going to separate. And over here, we have the law of independent assortment. Remember, characteristics, if they're not on the same chromosome, they separate independent of each other. Just because you get one trait doesn't mean you're going to get another trait. Okay. And again, here's a dihybrid or the first two. Remember, the parental is what you start with, and then you have the first philia, that's the kids, and then here they cross the kids, and they got the grandkids. So the kids would have all been one. They would have had the dominant traits, even though they had the recessive trait, it's covered up, and then they show up on the next generation. Okay, so Morgan showed that Mendelian inheritance has physical basis in the behavior of the chromosomes. Okay, this guy, his name was Thomas Morgan, and he was the one that kind of he found more information about chromosomes. Again, he had better equipment, he had more knowledge and stuff, so he came up with a lot more information to add on to Mendeleev's. Okay, so he said he was the first one that had a specific gene for a specific chromosome. Okay, I don't know if Mendeleev knew that, chromosome 6 had the characteristic for, wrinkled peas or whatever, and that it was always on chromosome 6. Morgan was the one that said, hey, this gene is here, it's always here. Okay, so he did a lot of work at that. His experiments really did a lot to prove Mendeleev's. Mendeleev, when he died, nobody really knew that he had discovered genetics. Okay, it wasn't until later they found it. Well, one of the guys that helped prove it was Thomas Hunt. Okay, what Thomas Hunt worked with was Drosophila, fruit flies. When I was in college, I took a genetics class. We played with a lot of fruit flies. The nice thing about fruit flies is in a week, you'll have a new generation. And really, when you're done, you don't feel too bad about, euthanizing a bunch of fruit flies. You know what I'm saying? But he did a lot of work with fruit flies, and he looked at characteristics of fruit flies. And fruit flies only have 6 chromosomes. So that was another thing that made it a little bit easier. Okay. He looked at several characteristics in a fruit fly. And like I said, it was easy to do lots of generation studies because they have really quick turnover as far as having children. Okay. They produce many, 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 many offspring, like Mendeleev with his peas, but these generations were even shorter. And again, bred every 2 weeks, pretty sweet, right? I know when we did our class, we would put 2 different characteristics together in a jar, and then we'd come back 2 weeks later, and then we'd start counting them, pretty quick. Okay. Oh, they only have 4 pairs. I thought they had 6. Oh, I'm thinking, what am I thinking? Anyway, okay, they only have 4 pairs of chromosomes. So, that's another thing. They still have lots of characteristics, but they only have 4 chromosomes, so it's easier to nail down where the traits are. Okay. He always talked about what he called a wild type or normal. And then remember, phenotypes is what they look like. Okay. So he looked at the flies and he looked for wild types and normal types, and he looked for non-normal types, what we'd call a recessive trait. And he was always working with these fly populations because, like I said, it was really easy to have lots of generations and to get lots of numbers. So, and the more numbers you have, the better your results are. Okay. If he had a trait alternate to the wild type, so if the normal was red eyes, for instance, then the mutant type was white eyes. So he called it the wild type and the mutant. We just call it dominant and recessive. Okay, here I go. Here's red eyes in a fruit fly, and here's white eyes. And when you're counting them, it's really easy to see this. Okay, it's weird because they're down here, and you got to do a million counts. And some of them wake up when you're doing it too, you guys. If you ever get to work with fruit flies, be prepared. You're counting and you got them sorted and you're counting them, and all of a sudden, whoop, one goes. Oh well, one less in my results, but it happens. Okay, correlation between behavior and that. Okay, so what he found, Morgan, the fly guy, when he mated male flies with white eyes, which would be the mutant, and again we call it the recessive, and a female fly with red eyes, which he called the wild type. I guess I'm more into dominant and recessive, but anyway, when he crossed them, all the first generation, all the babies had red eyes, which follows the same as Mendeleev did. When he took the parental and they had a dominant trait and recessive trait, all the offspring had the recessive trait. Okay, so in this case, same thing. Okay, but then when he bred two of the babies, and so the grandkids, the F2, the second philia generation, he had a 3-to-1 ratio. Again, just like Mendeleev, white to red. Okay, but what he also found were in fruit flies, only the males had white eyes. Okay, no females. The females all had red eyes. So he's like, okay, let me see what's going on here. Okay, he determined what Morgan is, his biggest contribution really is he determined that there's characteristics on the sex chromosomes. Okay, the white-eyed mutant or the recessive must be located on the X chromosome. Okay, so what Morgan's really given credit for is he discovered what we call sex-linked traits. Okay, and what a sex-linked trait means is the characteristic is found. Remember, we have our autosomes, our regular. In this case, in the fruit flies, they'd have 3 sets of autosomes, and then their last set is their sex chromosomes. Well, if a characteristic is on the sex chromosomes, the inheritance is a little different. Because if you think about it, if you're a female and you get an X chromosome with a bad trait, we'll call it a bad trait, okay? You get another X chromosome so you can cover it up. But if you're a male and you get an X chromosome with a bad trait, if you want to call it, you don't get another shot. You get a Y chromosome, it's not on there. So the white-eyed allele is on the X chromosome. If you're a female and you get another X chromosome to cover it up. If you're a male, you don't get that option. Okay, so that's a sex-linked trait. It's found on the sex chromosomes. Okay, so here they showed it again. We have a red eyes and white eyes, and then we have all red eyes in the thing. But if you notice, the females don't have white eyes, just the males. So that's called a sex-linked trait. Okay, sex-linked genes, they have a unique pattern. Again, in his discovery, and that's the biggest thing Morgan's known for, is discovering that correlated with the sex of the flies. Again, it's part of the chromosome theory of inheritance. You got it from the inheritance, but now it's specifically on the sex link, those last chromosomes. Okay, all right. And again, in humans and other animals, we know that a chromosome is the basis for sex determination. Okay, that the last set of chromosomes in humans are the sex chromosomes. If you get an X and an X, you're a female. If you get an X and a Y, you're a male. Okay. Now, if you have characteristics on those are also, you're going to be make a difference if you're a male or a female. Okay. So the chromosome basis of sex, again, in humans, we know it's we either get a large X. Everybody gets one of those. Okay. And then if you get another X, you're female. If you get a Y, you're a male. And the Y chromosome is smaller. It doesn't have as many characteristics on it. It doesn't have many traits. So again, if you get an X chromosome with some sort of characteristic on it, like one of the most common is colorblindness. If you know anybody that's colorblind, they're probably a male. Okay, in order for a female to be colorblind, she has to get 2 X chromosomes that have the colorblind gene on it. Okay, for a male, if he gets 1 X chromosome with colorblind, he's colorblind because he doesn't get another choice, another chance. Okay, so I think it's like 98% of people that are colorblind are male because you only get 1 shot where females get 2. Okay, a person with 2 X chromosomes, again, is a female. Oh, we already talked about all this. I'm babbling ahead. I'm sorry. But again, XX is a female, XY is a male, and it's in the zygote. It's the last set of chromosomes. And it is in animals and plants. Well, not plants, because plants are both. Never mind. Scratch that. I didn't say that. Animals. Okay? Only the ends of the Y chromosomes have regions that corresponded. So they do, know that they're supposed to go together, but it's just the ends of them. And again, the Y is a smaller chromosome. It's a little nubbin. Okay? So again, the Y determines if you're male or female. And here you see the difference between them. Okay, there's an X chromosome, there's a Y chromosome. In people, it's the XY system. In chickens, it's the ZW. Honestly, you guys, I don't know why it's a ZW, but here the female has 2 different ones and the male has the same. Okay, in grasshopper, the male only has 1 X, and they only get 1. And then if you look here, there's diploid, haploid with flies. In smaller ones, you'll have that system. They'll either have a full number of chromosomes or half the number of chromosomes. And if we only have half the number, you're a male. If you have the full number, you're a female. So, you have all kinds of different characteristics or ways. But again, it's the sex chromosomes determine if you have a male or a female. Okay, so the short segments at the end of the Y chromosomes, they're homologous to the X. So that's why they do pair together, even though they're different. And it's going to happen during meiosis. Remember when we separate into, when we make the gametes, that's when they're going to separate. Okay, a gene on the Y chromosome, and it's called the SRY, and it's the sex determining region, is responsible for the development of testes in an embryo. Okay, so basically, if you don't get a Y, you're not going to be a male. Okay, if you get 2 X's, there's not a region on there that develops, it's like X is, you don't get that hormone or you don't get that region. Okay, so the Y is what determines if you're a male. Okay, all right, and those are called sex-linked genes. I always talked about that. Any kind of characteristic that you get on that last set of chromosomes are called sex-linked. Okay, genes on the Y chromosome are called Y-linked genes, and here's a couple of them. Okay, let me see. Oops. Okay, there's more on the X chromosome, again, because it's a bigger chromosome. All right, let me see if we got some. Okay, so again, the X chromosome has genes for many characteristics unrelated to sex. So it's not just the X chromosome is all about sexual characteristics, and so is the Y. There's other characteristics too. One I talked about was colorblindness. Okay, so there's other genes on the sex chromosomes, not just sex related. Okay, the X-linked genes follow a pattern of inheritance. Okay, again, if you get the X chromosome, you have to get a bad one. It's a recessive trait. Okay, so like if you're a female and you get an X chromosome and it has a trait for colorblindness, all right, you have to have another one for colorblindness. You have to have 2 recessive traits in order to have it. But if you're a male, it's going to be dominated a male because you only get 1. Okay, colorblindness is not a big deal. Another bad one is hemophilia. Okay, hemophilia is on the sex chromosomes. If you're female, to be a hemophiliac, you have to have 2 bad X's. A male, you get 1 bad X and you have it. Okay, so the female has to get 2 bad copies, if you want to call it that. They have to be homozygous recessive to have the trait. A male only has to get 1. Hemizygous. Okay, because they only get 1. They only get 1 X chromosome. So there's a characteristic on the X chromosome. That's the way it works. Okay. X-linked disorders, again, are much more common in males than they are in females because of that. And here's the system, and this is probably where we're going to end. Again, if you're a male and you get a bad X, and then the other thing you get is a Y, you're going to have it. So the females have to get 2 bad copies. The male only has to get 1. And those are called sex-linked. And we'll talk more about some of those here next time we do notes.